All right, this is a presentation to discuss the basics of FERPA law with staff that work in Portage Public Schools. All right, let's start with what is FERPA. I'm sure that most people have heard of it before, but might not know exactly what the acronym means or what parts of educational documents and information are covered by FERPA. The acronym means Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. It's a federal law that was first passed in 1974. It's also been called the Buckley Act. It's been revised since then, especially in 1994. There were a few revisions made to it. And the basics are that it's designed to protect confidential information about students, to make sure that only relevant people are looking at them, and that students and their parents, if they're under 18 or still in a high school, have the access that they need to the files at all points in time. All right, why do we need FERPA? The first part would be to protect information about students. Educational records are very, very, very sensitive pile of information that a lot of people could see and have access to on a daily basis. Students don't have just one teacher anymore. There's so many people who access our students on a daily basis. Think about all the teachers that see our students, all the parapros, all the administrators, every secretary. People come in contact with our students and their personal information every day. And the other thing that FERPA allows is not only to make sure that the right people are accessing them, but to make sure that parents of students under 18 and students who are over 18 have access to them at all points in time, to review them, to apply for changes to be made if they feel the information is incorrect, or to move them to a different place should a student be transferring to a new school district or need the information for something. All right, now who is covered by FERPA? All students who are under the age of 18 and are still enrolled in a K through 12, could be a public school or anything that's federally funded. Also, the parents of these students are allowed access as well. That includes parents that the students live with, non-custodial parents as well can have access to the files. The student doesn't have to live with the parent for the parent to have access to those files. Once a student either reaches the age of 18 or transfers to some type of a post-secondary or after high school education, the rights to their FERPA and access to their files goes with the student. The parent no longer has the access. So FERPA in a college environment, as compared to, say, FERPA in our high school or in our district, is very different, because it's not something that necessarily involves the parents. A parent can't call a college and ask for access to academic records or schedules or transcript if their child is over the age of 18 or enrolled in post-secondary education. All right, now schools that have FERPA responsibilities. First of all, any school that works through and has any federal funding doesn't have to be a public school. Many colleges have federal funding, so they would be included in FERPA laws. Most K through 12 public schools, many K through 12 private schools have some federal funding as well, so they might be covered in it. They might have equal FERPA responsibilities as, say, a school that's considered public. Charter schools would be considered under FERPA responsibilities as well. All right, now educational records. What's considered an educational record? In general, any kind of information that could identify a student, personal information, academic records, transcripts, grades, schedules. Those are all things that would be included in a student's personal record. Medical records that might be relevant or that the school has been keeping that are relevant to a student's education. Attendance records, records of student absences, student attendance, anything like that. And then records about special education, including testing, qualification, prior qualification, anything that would be relevant to a student's disability, any kind of eligibility that they went through would be a part of an educational record as well. All right, there's some information that's not necessarily considered an educational record. For example, would be directory information, student's name, address, date of birth, honors and awards, photographs of students, dates the students attended, graduation information. Those are things that wouldn't necessarily need written permission to be released, but students or parents could request that information not be released if they want. They could ask that it not be considered directory information and not be released. The other would be law enforcement records. Those are not necessarily considered educational records either and wouldn't be protected under FERPA. All right, changes to student records. So now that we know who has access and what's in the records, parents or students can request that information within a record if they don't agree with it or they think that it's not correct. They can ask that it be changed. They can request in writing that the information be changed or updated. The school district can then decide whether or not those changes are going to be accepted. And from that point, if they decide not to change them, the family or the parent or the student is granted a formal hearing. After that, if the school decides still not to change the information in the record, they can, the parent or student or whoever's asking for the access and the change can ask to have a letter included that they write to argue or sort of give their viewpoint about why they think that information is not correct. Now, who is allowed access to files? Under the age of 18, parents are allowed access, and then over the age of 18 or when a student goes on to post-secondary, students are allowed access. Parents would not be allowed access at that point in time because the child would be the only eligible individual at that point in time. The other thing at the school is written permission doesn't always have to be obtained from the parent to look at the educational records. The school needs to determine those who have what would be called legitimate educational interest. Those people could access confidential student information. That would include administrators, counselors, and teachers who are involved with the student and would be looking at that information for educational purposes. Also, anyone who might be auditing or evaluating our school and our process. Also, legally, if anyone was going to subpoena records or any law official who was looking to subpoena records for a legal hearing could do that without written permission from the parents. Okay, so now that you know a little bit of the basics about who's supposed to be looking at records and what should be in them, here are some ways that you can protect yourself as a staff member, administrator, anyone in our district from violating FERPA rights. The first thing would be, as a district, we make sure that we inform students and parents at least annually about FERPA rights. Administrators need to make sure that that's done on a school basis as well as throughout the district. Make sure any records that you do have are kept secure and locked. Anything that you think might be included in an educational record at some point in time, make sure that you keep secure and locked until they can be added to the official educational records, which are kept at our central office. Also, make sure to not discuss personal student information with other teachers or administrators or staff unless that person has a genuine educational interest or need to know that. Make sure that you're being very careful about how you discuss student information with others. And whenever there is a doubt about who should be focusing on student records, always get written permission from the parents. And lastly, your responsibilities. This is just a general slide to kind of discuss general staff responsibilities about FERPA law. First thing is, make sure that you protect all confidential student information. Things that you know that might be in their educational file, Make sure if they're discussed, whether it's verbally or via email or notes or anything like that, make sure that you're trying your best to protect confidential student information, and that only those who are relevant and need to know are discussing that information with you. Also, make sure that you know how to access the files. If you have a parent or a student who wants to discuss that, make sure that you either forward them onto administration or onto the central office where they can access their files. They can either pay to get a copy, or they can actually come to the administration building and review the files themselves.